There is a strange kind of tiredness that sleep does not fix. Not the tiredness of the body. Not the kind that comes after hard work or a long day. It is quieter than that. It feels like your mind has been carrying too many voices for too long. And maybe lately, you have started wondering why even peaceful moments still feel crowded inside your head. You sit down to rest, but your thoughts keep moving. You finally have a free evening, but something inside you still feels restless. You wake up in the morning already mentally busy before the day has even begun. And the strange part is this. Nothing is actually wrong. Your life may not be falling apart. There may be no major crisis. No dramatic tragedy. No obvious reason for the heaviness you sometimes feel. Yet something inside you keeps asking for space. Not more entertainment. Not more advice. Not another productivity trick. Just a space. For years, many people believed that peace would arrive after life became simpler. After retirement. After success. After the children grew up. After the bills were paid. After the stress disappeared. But life rarely becomes completely quiet on its own. Even when the outside world slows down, the inside world often keeps racing. And this is where many people become confused. They assume something must be broken inside them because they cannot fully relax. But what if the problem is not weakness? What if your mind has simply forgotten what silence feels like? Modern life rewards constant stimulation. Every screen asks for attention. Every headline demands emotion. Every notification teaches the brain to stay alert. Even moments that once belonged to stillness are now filled with noise. People eat while scrolling. Walk while listening. Rest while consuming. And slowly, silence starts feeling unfamiliar. Almost uncomfortable. Not because silence is empty, but because silence reveals how full the mind has become. The Stoics understood something important thousands of years ago. A restless mind does not always come from a difficult life. Sometimes it comes from never stepping away long enough to hear your own thoughts clearly. And maybe that is what many people are truly hungry for today. Not escape. Not excitement. Not reinvention. Just relief from constant mental movement. Because when the mind never stops receiving, it eventually forgets how to settle. Think about how rare true silence has become. Not just physical silence. Mental silence. A moment where you are not preparing for tomorrow. Replying yesterday. Or reacting to everything happening around you. A moment where you simply exist without pressure. Many people have not experienced that feeling in years. And over time, the nervous system adapts to noise so completely that calmness starts feeling unnatural. This is why some people feel uneasy during quiet moments. Why they instinctively reach for the phone. Turn on the television. Check the news. Start another task. Feel another space. Because stillness forces us to meet ourselves again. And for many people, that reunion feels unfamiliar. But unfamiliar does not mean dangerous. It simply means neglected. There is a reason peaceful places affect us so deeply. A quiet beach early in the morning. Rain falling outside a window. A long walk before the world wakes up. A silent room with soft light at the end of the day. These moments do not heal us because they are dramatic. They heal us because they allow the mind to unclench. For a few minutes, the inner noise softens. And suddenly, life feels easier to breathe inside. Not because your problems disappear, but because your attention stopped fighting itself. This is something many people misunderstand. They believe peace comes from controlling life perfectly. But peace often begins the moment you stop feeding unnecessary noise. And maybe the reason you feel mentally crowded lately is not because your life is wrong. Maybe it is because your mind has not heard silence in too long. And once you begin seeing this clearly, an entirely different way of living starts to appear. Because the real issue may not be your circumstances at all. It may be the way constant stimulation has quietly reshaped your relationship with yourself. And that leads to a misunderstanding almost everyone carries without realizing it. One of the biggest misunderstandings people carry is the belief that peace must be earned. That before you are allowed to feel calm, life must first become perfect. Everything must be organized. Every conflict resolved. Every uncertainty removed. Only then, people think, will the mind finally relax. But life does not work that way. There will always be unfinished things. Conversations left unresolved. Unexpected changes. New responsibilities. New concerns. If peace depends entirely on external perfection, then peace will always remain temporary. The Stoics understood this deeply. They did not wait for the world to become gentle before learning calmness. They practiced calmness while life remained unpredictable. And that changes everything. Because so many people today are not exhausted by life itself. They are exhausted by constant mental resistance to life. Resistance to uncertainty. Resistance to slowing down. Resistance to silence. So many people sit quietly for 5 minutes and immediately feel the urge to escape the moment. Not because silence harms them, but because their mind has become conditioned to constant occupation. Modern culture often confuses busyness with meaning. If you are constantly active, constantly informed, constantly reacting, it can feel like you are staying important. But inwardly, endless stimulation creates fragmentation. Your attention gets pulled in dozens of directions every day. And eventually, your inner world begins to feel crowded even when your schedule is not. This is why many people feel strangely overwhelmed after spending hours online. Their body stayed still. But their nervous system traveled through hundreds of emotional experiences. Fear. Comparison. Urgency. Anger. Excitement. Distraction. Noise layered upon noise. The mind was never meant to absorb this much input without rest. Yet people often blame themselves instead of recognizing the environment affecting them. They say, I should be stronger. I should handle this better. I should be more motivated. But sometimes strength is not about pushing harder. Sometimes strength is stepping back before the mind becomes too full. The Stoics never admired unnecessary mental chaos. They admired clarity, presence, discernment, the ability to separate what truly matters from what merely demands attention. And today, that ability has become rare. Many people no longer know the difference between being informed and being mentally overcrowded. They no longer notice how much emotional weight they carry from things that never truly belong to them. Every opinion enters the mind. Every crisis becomes personal. Every piece of information feels urgent. Eventually, the mind loses its natural rhythm. And then people wonder why they cannot hear themselves think anymore. But silence is not laziness. Silence is not avoidance. Silence is not emptiness. Silence is where the mind reorganizes itself. Used like water becomes clear when left undisturbed, the human mind also settles when it is no longer constantly stirred. This is why clarity rarely arrives during noise. It arrives afterward. After the phone is put down. After the conversation ends. After the world becomes quiet enough for deeper thoughts to surface. Many people spend years trying to fix their life when what they truly need is enough silence to understand it clearly. Because confusion often grows inside overstimulation. And clarity often returns in stillness. Think about how many answers have come to you during simple quiet moments. Driving alone. Sitting outside at dusk. Walking without headphones. Taking a shower. Watching the sky. In those moments, the mind softens its grip. And what truly matters slowly rises to the surface. Not because you forced it, but because silence created room for it to appear. This is why inner peace cannot be forced through constant effort. Sometimes the more aggressively people chase peace, the further away it feels. Because peace is not something added to the mind. It is what remains when unnecessary noise begins to leave. And once a person truly understands this, they stop trying to repair themselves so aggressively. They begin creating space instead. A space to breathe. A space to think. A space to feel life without constant interference. And from that space, something unexpected begins to happen. The world itself starts looking different. The Stoics believe that the quality of your inner world shapes the quality of your outer experience. Not because thoughts magically control reality, but because perception changes the way reality is carried. Two people can walk through the same day and experience entirely different lives internally. One feels pressured by every inconvenience. The other moves through the same events with steadiness. The difference is not always circumstance. Often, it is mental space. A crowded mind reacts. A quiet mind observes. And the observation changes everything. Imagine muddy water inside a glass jar. If the jar keeps shaking, the water never clears. But if the jar is placed down gently and left undisturbed, clarity returns naturally. The Stoics approached the mind in a similar way. They understood that many emotional struggles become heavier when constantly agitated. Not because emotions are wrong, but because endless stimulation prevents them from settling. Modern life teaches people to immediately react to every feeling. Distract yourself. Fix it instantly. Escape discomfort. Feel the silence. But sometimes the healthiest thing a person can do is simply stop adding more noise. Not every thought deserves pursuit. Not every emotion requires panic. Not every moment needs interpretation. So many things soften naturally when given quiet space. This is one of the most freeing realizations a person can experience. You do not have to mentally wrestle every experience into submission. You can let some thoughts pass without turning them into identity. You can feel uncertain without assuming your life is broken. You can feel mentally tired without concluding that something is wrong with you. Because the mind, like the body, also needs recovery. And silence is part of that recovery. Think about how different life feels after spending time in nature. Not because trees solve your problems, but because nature does not overload your attention. It allows the nervous system to slow down. The Stoics often spend time walking, observing, reflecting quietly. Not as an escape from life, but as a return to balance. And maybe balance today requires something similar. Not abandoning the world. Not isolating completely. Just reducing unnecessary mental clutter. Sometimes people assume silence means doing nothing. But true silence is deeply active. It restores attention. It reconnects you to yourself. It allows hidden exhaustion to surface and release. It reminds you what your natural pace actually feels like. Because many people no longer live at a human pace. They live at the pace of alerts, algorithms, expectations, and endless urgency. And eventually, the soul begins asking for something slower. Something quieter. Something real. The beautiful thing is that clarity often arrives gradually. Not in dramatic revelations, but in subtle moments. You begin noticing how little truly requires your emotional energy. You stop reacting to every small disturbance. You feel less pulled toward constant consumption. Simple moments become enough again. A cup of coffee in silence. Morning light through a window. A peaceful drive. A slow conversation. These things begin feeling nourishing because your attention is no longer fragmented. And perhaps this is what many people secretly miss most. Not excitement. Not achievement. But the ability to feel present inside ordinary life again. The Stoics knew that inner freedom rarely comes from controlling the external world. It comes from loosening the inner noise that keeps pulling the mind away from itself. And once a person experiences even a small amount of real silence, they often realize something surprising. They were never as trapped as they thought. Their mind was simply overcrowded. And that overcrowding quietly shaped the way they interpreted everything. But when the noise begins to fade, a deeper understanding begins to emerge. Not only about the world, but about the hidden habits of the human mind itself. The human mind is constantly interpreting reality. Not just observing it. Interpreting it. This is important to understand. Because two people can experience the exact same moment and walk away carrying completely different emotional weight. When mind tightens around the experience, the other allows it to pass naturally. The Stoics spend enormous time studying this difference. They notice that suffering often grows not from events themselves, but from the layers added by the mind afterward. The endless commentary. The repeated replaying. The anticipation. The resistance. And modern life intensifies this process. People rarely experience one emotion at a time anymore. Instead, the mind becomes flooded with overlapping impressions all day long. A stressful headline. An argument online. Financial worry. Comparison. Noise from television. Pressure from social expectations. Information without pause. Eventually, the nervous system remains subtly activated even during calm moments. And this creates a strange condition many people now live inside. The body is resting, but the mind never fully arrives there. This is why some people feel tired immediately after waking up. Their mind never truly became quiet enough to recover. The Stoics understood that attention is one of the most valuable forces in human life. Whatever repeatedly captures attention begins shaping identity. If attention is constantly scattered, inner stability weakens. But if attention becomes calmer and more deliberate, the mind slowly regains balance. This does not happen overnight. And it does not require perfection. Only awareness. You begin noticing what fills your mind unnecessarily. You notice how certain environments leave you mentally heavy. You notice how constant input affects your breathing, paciencia, and clarity. And perhaps most importantly, you stop treating your mind like a machine that should endure endless stimulation without consequence. Silence becomes less of a luxury and more of a necessity. Not dramatic silence. Simple silence. Moments where the mind is allowed to stop consuming. This is why many people suddenly feel emotional during quiet moments. Not because silence creates problems, but because silence finally allows buried exhaustion to surface. The mind says, finally, enough space to breathe. And often, people misunderstand this release. They think feeling emotional means they are becoming weaker. But many times, it means the nervous system is finally unclenching after years of tension. The Stoics never believed humans should become emotionless. That is a modern misunderstanding. They believed humans should become less controlled by unconscious reactions. There is a difference. A quiet mind still feels deeply, but it no longer becomes consumed by every passing disturbance. It develops perspective. And perspective changes the emotional experience of life. For example, many worries lose strength when observed slowly instead of reacted to instantly. Not because the problems disappear, but because the mind stops magnifying them continuously. Silence creates distance between you and automatic reactions. That distance is powerful. Inside that distance lies choice. The ability to pause. The ability to see clearly before reacting. The ability to remain grounded even while life remains imperfect. This is why silence is not passive. It is transformative. It retrains attention. It softens mental compulsiveness. It reconnects you with the present moment instead of endless mental projection. And over time, something beautiful begins happening. The world feels less hostile, less urgent, less overwhelming. Not because circumstances changed dramatically, but because the mind stopped carrying every experience as a threat. Many people today are not truly overwhelmed by life. They are overwhelmed by prolonged mental overstimulation. And once this becomes visible, self-blame begins fading. You realize you were not failing at life. You were simply overloaded for too long without enough stillness to recover. That realization alone can feel deeply liberating, because it replaces shame with understanding. And understanding creates softness. A softer relationship with yourself. A softer pace. A softer inner voice. The Stoics believed wisdom often arrives quietly. Not through force. Not through emotional extremes. But through careful observation of the mind and gentle correction of attention. And perhaps one of the wisest things a person can learn today is this. Not every moment must be filled. Not every silence needs interruption. Not every thought deserves continuation. Sometimes peace begins the moment we stop feeding the noise that exhausts us. And once that understanding settles deeply, daily life itself begins changing in subtle but meaningful ways. Real change rarely begins with dramatic transformation. It usually begins with small adjustments repeated quietly. The Stoics understood this well. They did not chase perfection. They practiced awareness. And perhaps that is the healthiest place to begin. Not with pressure. Not with rigid routines. Used awareness. You may start noticing how often you automatically reach for stimulation. A phone during quiet moments. Background noise during meals. Constant information during rest. Not because you are doing something wrong, but because modern habits slowly train the mind to fear stillness. So instead of forcing major changes, begin gently creating small spaces of silence. Very small spaces. A few quiet minutes in the morning before checking the world. A short walk without headphones. Sitting outside without needing entertainment. Driving in silence once in a while. Allowing the nervous system to settle naturally. At first, silence may feel unfamiliar. The mind may immediately search for distraction. That is normal. The goal is not to fight the mind, only to notice its habits compassionately. Over time, something subtle begins happening. Your thoughts become less rushed. Your breathing softens. You begin hearing yourself more clearly again. And many decisions that once felt emotionally tangled start becoming simpler. Not because life suddenly changed, but because mental clutter decreased. Another gentle practice is learning to pause before reacting. The Stoics value this deeply. Not suppressing emotion. Not pretending not to care. Simply creating a small moment of space before immediately responding. A difficult comment. An unexpected inconvenience. A stressful piece of news. Instead of instantly absorbing the emotional weight, pause. Breathe once. Observe. Ask quietly. Does this truly deserve all of my energy? That single moment of awareness can completely change the direction of your inner experience. Because many forms of suffering are intensified through immediate unconscious reaction. Silence interrupts that cycle. It allows wisdom to arrive before impulse takes over. And slowly, life becomes lighter. Not because everything becomes easy, but because you stop mentally carrying unnecessary weight. You also begin appreciating ordinary moments differently. This is one of the quiet gifts of inner stillness. The ability to fully experience simple things again. A calm evening. Birds outside the window. Warm tea. A familiar song. A peaceful conversation. These moments stop feeling small. They begin feeling sufficient. The Stoics believe contentment grows when attention returns to the present instead of endlessly chasing stimulation. And modern life often pulls attention away from what is already enough. Silence helps restore that connection. It reminds you that peace is often closer than the mind assumes. Not hidden in some future version of life. Not waiting beyond perfect circumstances. But available in small unnoticed moments already surrounding you. This does not mean abandoning ambition or responsibility. It simply means no longer sacrificing your inner balance to constant noise. You can still care deeply about life while protecting your mental space. You can still stay informed without drowning in endless input. You can still participate in the world without losing yourself inside it. The goal is not withdrawal. It is discernment. Knowing what deserves access to your attention. And perhaps most importantly, learning that silence is not something you must earn after exhaustion. It is something the human mind naturally needs. Used like sleep. Used like breath. Used like rest. And once silence becomes a regular part of life again, many things that once felt heavy begin softening on their own. Not through force, but through space. Maybe nothing is wrong with you. Maybe your mind has simply been carrying too much noise for too long. Too many voices. Too many demands. Too many impressions without enough quiet space in between. And perhaps what you truly need is not another solution, but permission to slow down internally. To stop treating every thought as urgent. To stop filling every empty space. To stop believing peace must wait until life becomes perfect. The Stoics understood that clarity does not arrive through endless mental struggle. It arrives when the mind becomes still enough to see clearly again. Like water settling after disturbance. Like the sky appearing once the storm passes. And maybe this is why silence feels so healing. Because say underneath all the noise, something inside you already knows how to rest. It simply has not been heard lately. You do not need to force yourself into becoming someone entirely new. You do not need to chase constant self-improvement. You do not need to solve every uncertainty immediately. Sometimes wisdom begins with something much simpler. Creating enough silence to reconnect with yourself again. Not the version shaped by pressure, but the quieter self underneath all the mental movement. The self that still knows how to breathe slowly. How to notice small beauty. How to sit peacefully without needing constant distraction. That part of you was never lost. Only crowded. And once you begin protecting your inner space more carefully, life starts feeling different. Not necessarily easier, but clearer, softer, more grounded. You begin realizing that many things never deserved as much mental energy as they receive. And slowly, your relationship with life changes. You stop fighting every moment. You stop chasing constant stimulation. You stop interpreting every feeling as a problem to fix. Instead, you begin allowing life to move naturally again. With more space. More awareness. More calm. And perhaps this is the quiet truth many people need to hear today. You are not failing at life. You are simply overdue for silence. So tonight, maybe put the phone down a little earlier. Sit quietly for a few minutes. Listen into the evening. Let the world slow down around you. Not because you are escaping life, but because you are finally returning to it. And if this helped you see things differently, consider subscribing to Stoic Penglai for more modern Stoic reflections designed to bring clarity, calmness, and perspective to everyday life. Until next time, protect your peace carefully. And remember, nothing is wrong. You just need silence.